But anyway, thank you very much. Gosh, there's so many of them. And people still coming in. Oh, very good.
It was a huge line.
I hope the place is cool enough. Do you want to introduce me?
Of course, everybody. John Rhys-Davies is the man, the myth, and the legend.
Well, thank you again. I suppose we ought to wait for these people to settle down. Some boys and girls are always late for class. I name no names, follow my eyes. Well, it's, so what should we talk about today? What's interesting and important and exciting happening in the world? Ebola. Let's talk about Ebola. Yes. Well, look, just to reassure you slightly, if you travel on an aeroplane with someone who is infected with Ebola, you will probably be all right unless he starts vomiting or bleeding or pooping. Just avoid vomit, poop, and blood, and you'll probably be all right, because he can sail around the world a couple of times before his infections become apparent. So don't panic. It's not the end of the world this week. Can't speak for a month from now, but there you are. What else? What other fears do we need to assuage today? Yes, solar storms, my dear. You know, one of these days, you're not going to be able to plug in that charger for your earphones at all, because it'll all be fried. One good blast of the solar wind and, that's it. We're back into the Stone Age. What would I advise there? Oh, I don't know. Throw your darn headset away before then and crank up the old battery type radio and things like that. The old hand-generated battery things. What else? What other? I'm only vamping here to let these people come in.
Poles flipping?
If people have questions for you, you're welcome to line up at the front at either of these microphones.
Oh, pole.
North Pole, South Pole flipping?
Oh yes, the poles are about to flip. Well, personally, I've never met a flipping pole in my life. But that sort of thing. Yes, of course, you're right. Yes, that'll be interesting. Thank God for GPS, because it sure would make navigation on the open water a bit tricky, wouldn't it? I think that will happen, well, anywhere between next week and 300, 500, 700,000 years from now. But it does look as if North-South are about to flip. And since it's happened so many times before, I suspect we're going to survive that. Be interesting to see what the birds do, won't it?
Yeah.
Those migrating birds, who have little sort of magnets in their heads to tell them to go south for summer, or south in winter time. I wonder whether they're going to sort of say, oh gosh, we've got to go north for winter. That's the place to be. A bit like sort of Canadians coming to Florida, isn't it? Perhaps they'll be doing it the other way. Those snowies, they'll go the other way this time. Any other panics and fears? Okay, well, I think we're just about all in now. So, who's got a good question? Have you got a good question?
What's your favorite color?
Girl. What do you expect me to say? Something? Oh, puce, I think. No, what? Little girls do ask that. My daughter asks me that question all the time. I like bright colours. I mean, I like that sort of green, and that sort of green, and that sort of blue, and that sort of red. Primary colours, really. Why? Because I'm going to be in a dark box for a long time. And I like to sort of see a little bit of light and colour before I make the exit. Not that I'm coming to do this, but you never can tell. You know what the great aphorism is? If you want to make God laugh, tell him you have a plan. Anyway, so who's got some good questions?
We've got questions on either side. Feel free to-
All right, questions on either side. And your starter for one, sir.
Hi. So this is an age-old question, and I don't expect you to have any bias whatsoever in answering this. But
Dwarves, of course.
of course. But this goes back a little bit farther. So, Star Wars or Lord of the Rings?
Oh, that's an interesting one, isn't it? I think I'll tell you why I think Lord of the Rings. Partly because I think there's more coherence in the story than there really is in Star Wars. And yet, the inventiveness of Star Wars is just incredible. There was just a little bit of unevenness in the course of the making of it. But they are, astonishing things. And I love science fiction, so it's a very hard one for me to say. Normally, I would say science fiction over fantasy most times, but I think they're just more coherent because Tolkien was a very literary man and wrote a great masterpiece. Anyway, is that a satisfactory answer?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Right, your turn.
Check. This is similar to his, but not really. Do you think it's fair to compare and contrast Game of Thrones versus Lord of the Rings in the novels and the movies?
I think it's fair to do anything in comparison if you like. Does it make sense? Well, that whole sort of fantasy thing is really created by Tolkien. But that whole type of fiction, really, it belongs to him. Game of Thrones is, the bits that I've seen are terrific. And I suppose anything that grabs you is exciting and interesting. The other thing is that, it introduces us to the world that we have escaped from. There is not a single man, woman, or child in this room who does not, in their background, have a slave ancestor. Einstein said, if I've seen further than most, it is because I stand up on the shoulders of giants. The real giants are our ancestors. Those men and women who just struggled long enough to stay alive so that they could have children and bring them up, and some of them survived. Those are the giants that we should remember. And when I see people filled with existential angst, as I suppose I was when I was a lot younger, I just want to remind them, what's the meaning of life? I will tell you now what the meaning of life is. The first meaning of life is to survive. The second is to make sure that you do at least as well as your mum and dad did, and if you can, do better. And the third is to make sure that your children are prepared and set up to do better than you. That's what it's about. Now you can add all sorts of religious and theological nuts and bolts and pictures to that. But in the end, that is what it's about. And as long as we concentrate on it, as long as we say, you know what, my mum and dad did a good job. These are harder times, but I'm going to at least do as well as they did. Or my mum and dad did a good job, I'm going to do it better. You know, and I'm going to make sure that my children do even better than that. As long as we as a people, as a society, as mankind, keep that in our minds, there is no limit to what we can do. There is no limit to our potential and to the spread of our humanity indeed throughout the stars. Just don't get bogged down with the distractions. I mean, I love your American Constitution. I mean, it is written by some of the brightest English minds, of course. But there is one phrase that I always choke over slightly. It is a glorious line. The right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, actually, I think Jefferson was taking it from Locke, and it should have been life, liberty, and property, which is what Locke wrote. But he didn't want to put property in because that included slaves, and that was not acceptable, and rightly so. But the problem is he has to put in something, and the pursuit of happiness is such a wonderful and felicitous phrase that it seduces us all. The only snag is, if you pursue happiness, it will elude you. Happiness is not a destination. Happiness is the byproduct of energetic good work. Aristotle said that. Aristotle said happiness comes from the pursuit of virtue, he said, which I translate to be, go home, go to work, work hard, do what you do with passion and interest and intelligence and exhaust yourself with it, and then come home, and as you're coming home, that funny little glow will come over you of happiness. That's the place you find happiness. Don't look for it as a destination that you're going to go to on a holiday forever. It follows that there are no short cuts to happiness. Alcohol will not give you happiness, it will change your mind. Drugs certainly won't make you happy. There are no shortcuts to happiness. If you're going to find happiness, you've got to work, you've got to be good, you've got to do good things, and you've got to do it diligently. And then, as I say, you'll come home and there will be that lovely feeling of, I was good today. I really did that rather well. And that glow of happiness goes over you. Sorry, I'm a silly old pedant, I beg your pardon. Anyway, I'm not suggesting you tear out Jefferson, by the way. He's brilliant. But I always find it misleading, that particular aphorism. What was the question? Right, carry on. Next question.
All right, I was just curious. If you ever got a hold of an oracle similar to the one from Aladdin, what would your one question be?
If I got hold of an oracle, oracles are wonderful things. I've just been rereading a great Greek historian called Herodotus. In fact, our word history comes from the Greek word historia, which actually means inquiries. And he's really the first historian that we know about. And he's good on oracles. King Midas, you see. King Midas, as you know, was infinitely rich. Anything he touched really became gold. He was a successful businessman, a successful king, and he considered himself pretty remarkable. But the Persians were on the borders, and the Persians were a pushy old lot. And Midas, who had never failed in battle, had never failed in any of his undertakings, decided that he would just check with the oracle at Delphi to make sure that, that he was on the right track. Don't forget, he had presented some great sort of votive offerings to the oracles of Delphi. Two, I think, sort of, I may be wrong, I'm not sure if they were candle holders, but they're 5 foot high, made of solid gold and things like that. So you would presume that the Pythian oracle was, Pythian oracle was pretty well disposed towards him. So he sent his counselors along to check with the oracle, and the oracle was asked, if Midas invades Persia, will the outcome be successful? And the oracle, of course, answered back saying, if Midas attacks Persia, a great empire will fall. Couched in the belief that actually that meant that he'd be successful, he advanced into Persia, lost the battle, lost the war, and was taken prisoner. Oracles are pretty tricky things, you see. A smart oracle will give you a double-edged answer. A smart oracle wants you to sort things out for yourself. Otherwise, they're false oracles. So, what would I ask an oracle? What would I ask an oracle? What would the answer be? That would be a tricky one, wouldn't it? Yes. What would I ask the oracle? Yes. It would have to be one of the great problems, wouldn't it? When I die, will I be conscious of anything after that? And what would the oracle say back to me? I think the oracle will probably be very clever. It will probably say something like, if you believe you are dead, you will be. It would have to be something like that. I don't know. What would you ask the oracle? Oh, which football team is going to win next week? If I go short on gold this month, will I make a fortune? What's the way around Ebola or something like that? Actually, I really mean it. Don't worry too much about it. It could be some sort of pandemic, but it isn't at the moment. It's just an epidemic, and we are remarkably well prepared. And as long as we use our heads, we'll probably survive it. Like H1N1 and all those other variants, swine fever and avian flu and all that sort of thing that the mental wiped us out a few days ago, or months ago. All right, next question.
We do have 10 minutes left for questions.